Welcome back to another episode of the Course Creation Incubator. I'm Gina Onativia, your host, excited to get you going with your course creation, your marketing, to build up your course business. Whatever reason you stopped by today, welcome and can't wait to get started with you. If you've been listening for a while, you know I'm originally from New York, and I come from a family of wannabe comedians. In other words, we all think we're funny. And I think that's probably a little bit of that Northeast mentality. And the running joke in my family for a long time is if you crack a series of jokes, we'll say to you, when is the HBO special coming out? Now, it should probably be updated to when is the Netflix special coming out, but you get the idea. We're always busting each other's chops, trying to one-up one another. And I'm always looking for the humor, especially in courses. And I've had the honor of looking at a couple of different courses the last few weeks that are in progress. And some of them have really good content. And I can tell they're going to teach students something great. There's going to be a huge transformation here. It's going to be powerful. However, I saw a serious lack of emotion. Where's the fun? Where's the laughter, the goosebumps, the tears, and the humor? And I talk about this with my friend Mike, and I'll link to that in the show notes, about how to inject humor into your scripts. Because the truth is, scripts that provide emotion stick to your students. They're memorable, and they'll want to come back. And let's face it, enjoyable material is easier to get through, right? If you're a student, it lightens the mood. Think about when you went through school. Which teachers or professors did you like the best? Maybe, probably, the ones who shared stories, who had all of the great examples, who surprised you, moved you the day to day. And I don't care what kind of course you have, whether it's how to get into law school or revamping your kitchen, you want that kind of emotion. So what I want to talk about today is how to punch up the content inside of your course. Now, Hacks just came out, season 2 on HBO Max, and if you don't know about this show, Jean Smart is a veteran comedian named Deborah Vance, who teams up with a younger, 20-ish comedy writer, and her name is Ava. Ava is there to punch up Deborah's jokes and bring in new material. So she's a punch-up writer, and there to make something that doesn't really land even better. And I heard about this concept before. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who I'm a huge fan of, from Fleabag, which is one of the greatest shows of all time. If you haven't watched season 2, please go and watch it. She's an incredible comedic writer. And I was reading that she was hired to punch up No Time to Die, the latest Bond movie, to add more energy to the script, more humor, come from a different perspective. So I was thinking, what if we could be our own punch-up writers? Now, I'm not asking you to hire Ava from Hacks or Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I want you to be your own writer, your own punch-up writer, and figure out how to add those different layers to your course content and add that personality more than anything else. Because a lot of times when we sit down to write our course scripts, sometimes we don't focus on the personality shining through. Because maybe you're so focused on getting the content done, you forget to bring that personality in, or it's just not second nature yet. So today I want to talk about how to be your own punch-up writer and let your personality shine through. And by the way, a good precursor to this podcast is listening to my Scripting Made Easy podcast back in episode 67, where I walk through a 7-step formula for you to script. Make sure to check that out. If you want, you could pause this right now, go to that one, and then come back. This is really a companion to that episode because I want you scripting with ease. I want you taking the overwhelm out of it and then getting into the flow. And then you can come back to this episode and be your own punch-up writer. Now, in that episode, I talk about rounds of writing your scripts. And depending on your process, doing a round 1 where you're just getting your content out there. You're laying down the tracks, so to speak. And as you go through your content, you can flag anything that may feel dry to you. And you can mark it as punch up later, or just put PU. So you know you have to come back to it. Then in round 2, you'll add that flair, that richness, and you know you're going to punch it up. And for us as course creators, it's not really about having a joke that doesn't land. That's what a punch-up writer in Hollywood is about. But for us, it's about needing that life, that emotion, the personality. So keep that in mind. All right, so I thought I'd go through 3 ways that you could be your own punch-up writer. And the first and foremost is adding those personal anecdotes. And we talk about this in the Incubator Podcast, and adding those personal stories and not being afraid to share them. And I had Dawn Eason on in episode 69. I'll link to that in the show notes. And we talk about why these personal stories are so important when you're teaching, when you're sharing your content, to have people connect with you, to have people really want to take the next step with you. So, for example, a mentor of mine posted that she was moving to a new city, and this is on LinkedIn, and the post blew up because she was sharing a personal story, personal details about moving to a different city. Her husband had recently passed, and this was her next adventure. And this is someone who we don't hear often from and definitely doesn't share personal details like that. So like I said, this post blew up. It had so many comments. It was wonderful to see. And why did it blow up? Because it was personal. We could relate to it. We cared. It moved us as humans. Now we care about her as a human being, and your students are going to care about you and who you are. And they're going to want to hear those personal details about you and what you're going through, challenges you're facing, the wins, the triumphs. That's how you bring the personality into it, by sharing those stories. Now, for my mentor in that LinkedIn post, that was just a simple life update, right? It wasn't even a full-blown story, but it was compelling. And think about the stories you can tell that make people want to connect with you. Now, I tell personal stories at the beginning of this podcast because I want you guys to have a better sense of who I am, and I want to connect with you. I share those stories because I want you to learn from my mistakes, or I'm working on being vulnerable. It's a work in progress. And you know, I'm always sharing stories about Tristan, usually funny mom stories or where I failed. So the more vulnerable, the better. Now, what does this look like? What's the practical application here? Well, like I was saying a few minutes ago, you could do your round 1 of scripting. Then in round 2, you could go back and see where you marked up to punch it up, to add a little bit of personality later. And then you can brainstorm. You could even build a chart for each of the lesson and think about how you want to punch up each one and just start going through brainstorming stories. Like, I love just thinking about stories and brainstorming that process. And sometimes rather than trying to go through each script and getting stuck, I'll just think about all the stories that I could add to a course and maybe think about where you can plug them in. Or maybe you have a welcome for each module and you bring a personal story into that. So I love to have like a 1 or 2 minute really quick intro setting the stage to each module. And this is a great opportunity for you to share a personal story or an example. Now, I have a done-for-you client who's doing just that. They're teaching how to communicate more effectively for teams, and they're bringing in these funny stories about, for example, having unrealistic expectations with the air conditioning repairman. It's great, it's personal, it's off the cuff. It makes the course that much more interesting. Then the second piece is to turn something dry or just plain wrong, maybe it was a mistake or a fail, into something funny. Now, I mentioned that Mike Paccioni podcast. I definitely want you listening to that if you haven't already. And I see every opportunity to add humor, especially when I've made a mistake. This is about going back to being vulnerable. I just recorded a podcast, talk about a mistake that I made. This was a total fail. I just recorded this podcast with a friend, and she was asking me about starter courses and where to start. And I brought up Ayurveda as an example for a course because I've had Talia Lutzker as a student. She's been on this podcast. She's an Ayurvedic specialist, an expert. She's amazing. So I like to use her all the time about building out a starter school or a starter course. So I bring her up as an example. I bring up Ayurveda, and my friend just stops me and says, "Oh, what's Ayurveda?" And then all of a sudden, I'm defining what Ayurveda is, which is kind of a joke, guys, because I can barely do any yoga moves, and I just do not consider myself an enlightened person who is able to fully define what Ayurveda is. You're not going to see me teaching a yoga class anytime soon. So I'm trying to stumble through this. And then I took a beat and I said, well, don't look for that Ayurveda starter kit from me in 2023. And then what I wish I had said at the end was, Thanks for having me on. Maybe we can get the Ayurvedic Institute to sponsor this podcast. So I made it into something funny instead of it being embarrassing. And I'm always thinking, how can I save this? How can I make a setback into a funny story? Because I really believe humor can come out of everything, and even something truly messed up. That's how I was raised. A lot of times we're funny because maybe we're being a little sarcastic, or we're kind of upset about something, but we crack a joke to make us feel better. Because I've always found that even laughing when you're crying is a better way to go and to help you through whatever's going on. So use that humor inside of your scripts. You don't have to do it in every script, by the way. You don't have to do it in every lesson. You can pick and choose along with your personal stories. All right, my third example, or another way for you to punch up your scripts, is to bring in outside examples, your student and customer stories, peppering those throughout. Now, students love examples because it helps them see what's possible. It might also help them better understand how they can apply what you're teaching. Like they see the practical application of what you're teaching, what you're showing them. I know a lot of times with the accelerator, I'll be teaching a concept like my post-it exercise process. And then when I bring up a demo or I bring up how a student has used that process, the exercise really comes alive for them because they can see the thoughtful application of it. Always when you're teaching, bring in the concept, then give them an example, and then have them apply. So don't discount those examples of the practical application of what you're teaching them. And also, examples are a great way of proving that your teaching works, that somebody took it and made it happen for them, right? You're not just teaching in a vacuum and you're making up these principles that may or may not work. By showing how another student did it, you're showing, okay, this really has merit. This is a proven concept or process or system. Now go do it. And I was just talking to my mentor, Vic Gibson, in the last episode. If you haven't listened to that one already, listen to it. We give so many great marketing and sales tips about how I get such great stories from my sales calls, my one-on-one calls. And I use them all the time in my courses. Now, I change or withhold the names, but oftentimes they're fascinating examples. Okay, one more thought here. You could also ask someone to punch up your script. Now, like I said before, I'm not going to have expectations for you to find like an Ava or a Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but think about somebody who's really invested in you, invested in your course, invested in your business, who can bring in a different perspective. Maybe it's a modern perspective. Maybe it's a different gender. Maybe it's somebody who brings a younger or an older perspective. Think about who you can bring in to just take a look. Now, I don't want you getting lost and diverting on this and having somebody completely rewrite your scripts or redo your scripts, but they're coming in over the top and here and there suggesting little stories or anecdotes or details. And again, make sure this is someone who believes in you and wants you to succeed. You want someone who can help you take your ideas and make them even better. All right, one final thought here is the beginning and end of your course and punching up those bookmarks. Thinking about your welcome experience and your welcome script, making sure there's emotion in there, personality, starting with a bang because you want them to feel that excitement. You're starting with them the right way. And then you want to leave them on a high. Now, my friend Mike, who we've been talking about, taught me this. He does coaching for on-stage talks, but this applies to content and courses as well. What's that emotional high that you're leaving them on? Are you closing out your course with something powerful? Don't just say, hey, that's it. Great job. See you later. Think about great events that you've been to where speakers, like Tony Robbins is a great example, my old boss. He leaves you on an emotional high. He does this recap during UPW and it's truly powerful. Actually, at every event he does this. You close your eyes. He goes through all these different emotions and exercises you've done over the last few days and you feel the energy of what you've accomplished and it just surges through you. The music is soaring. You're laughing. You're crying. It's powerful. Think about how you can replicate that on a smaller scale. Bring that into your course creation. Leave them on that high. All right, hopefully this was helpful and you're thinking about becoming your own punch-up writer. Write to me and let me know if you're using this or just send me some funny jokes or stories. I would love it and then maybe I'll share it with my family and we can have a chuckle. Share it with me on Insta at Course Creation Boutique and let me know what you thought about this episode. If it was helpful for you in any way, I would love for you to leave me a review. And finally, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss one incredible episode. I'll see you next week. Go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.